Hello, and welcome to today's session. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Grote, Senior Systems Engineer and Technical Partner Manager here at VMware. Today, we've got another great session for you. We're going to be talking all about end user computing, a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, has been for a long time. After all, this is what we build virtualization. This is what we build data centers for. It's to serve the needs of the end users. And those end users are constantly driving us to new and exciting horizons. The whole idea of brave IT starts with them. We've talked about things like the technological glaciers that we face. Everything from mobile devices, bring your own device, into the data and the security and the software, things like shadow IT. So today, we're here to look at all of the new enhancements, or at least some of my favorites, inside of the new Horizon release, as well as some of the particulars about how all of this fits together and how we can easily communicate these ideas to our customers as trusted advisors. So I've prepared a couple whiteboards for us today to show how all of this snaps together. We've got some great update information, including content surrounding user environment management. And we've got a demo from one of our own architects, Mr. Stefan Asselin, who has been gracious enough to provide us with a video that walks us through some of the really cool things we can do with UEM now. So with no further ado, let's get on with the show. So as we're looking at talking about updates to end user computing, it's important to look at the environments. We all know that there are disparities between what's happening outside of the user space versus what's happening inside of IT demand and capacity, and that we as IT professionals are challenged with having insight and being able to provide guidance into all of these arenas while still matching up with the needs of the business, the needs of the users, scalability and security concerns of IT. But it's growing. We're seeing now not only users adopting their bring your own device mentality with tablets and laptops and things like this, but we're also now seeing rising concerns over the implementations themselves. It's no longer enough just to be able to provide desktop resources to users. We now have to consider what's happening with those resources as they interact with other physical and virtual resources that reside within the data center. After all, the whole point of providing a virtual desktop infrastructure is to give users the ability to have more secured access within the data center. But now those desktops live inside of the data center, so we have to consider what's happening once they're there. We also have increased concerns and ideas around how to give users access. Users are operating and interacting with workloads in new ways, maybe based upon location, whether the user's accessing these workloads from home or from work, or maybe based upon other conditions. We couple that with concerns over data security, scalability, security and intrusion inside and outside of the network, and how we're going to scale these workloads outward, and how we're going to integrate and accommodate for these new types of workload interactions, and how we as IT professionals are going to gain some insight into this space so that we're aligning with business needs, and how we're going to make sure that users are still able to collaborate effectively internally and externally without sacrificing security or fluidity within the line of business. These are the problems that are being addressed and the solutions that are being brought forward inside of all of the new updates that VMware is bringing to market. And these are what we're going to talk about today. Digging right into the end user computing updates, one of the most important things, at least from my personal opinion, is to remember that end user computing, at the end of the day, is really all about people. We were talking in the whiteboard. It's about the way IT is interacting with users. It's about the way that users are interacting and helping to drive IT adoption. And specifically for us as IT professionals, the way that we're evaluating what's happening inside of the user space so that we're providing the right types of insight. So knowing that users are really the ones that are driving these ideas, there's been a lot of stuff that people have asked for. And so, you've asked, we've listened. IT and users wanted broader OS support, more endpoint options for what they could do, more support inside of services that they could provide, and specifically enhanced security keeps coming up again and again as we're looking at adopting these new ideas and paradigms. There's been a ton of changes inside of the Horizon and end user computing platform here at VMware, but today we're going to focus really inside of operating systems, user-centric computing, as well as management and access. A big one is unlimited access and Chromebook readiness. So what does this mean? How do we apply this inside of the space we're working? Well, conventionally, you'd have a couple common type of ideas that you'd have to work with, right? You would either be dealing with thin clients or thick clients or maybe even zero clients, either reusing existing endpoints or it would be a complete net new purchase of endpoints. And there was always a lot of back and forth over what was going to be best, what was going to fit best inside of refresh cycles and all of this. Chromebooks became very popular in the last few years, and VMware's made no mistake about the fact that we are definitely invested in this idea. They're cost effective, they're highly flexible, but they do lack certain forms of functionality because of the operating system that's embedded within them. So now inside of the new versions of Horizon and Workspace, we're able to have full access to applications, streaming applications, access to Workspace, SAML-based, federated applications, all of this being passed through to Chromebooks. So now when we're looking at how we're addressing our solutions, we have a cool new platform that we can integrate into this space when we're talking about cost efficiencies, when we're talking about device flexibility. Flexibility goes even further when we talk about support for Linux operating systems. For the longest time, if you were doing virtual desktop, you could use any device you wanted, but at the end of the day, it was going to run a conventional Windows operating system as the target. A lot of you may be familiar with what was previously called Project Phoenix, which is now support for Linux inside of Horizon. So what this means is that instead of having to deal with expensive static fundamental operating systems on the other end for what users are accessing, customers now have more freedom of choice in the operating system and the ability to support deployments that use Linux endpoints in addition to Windows endpoints. So tons more flexibility when we're looking at what user environments can do. When we start introducing these ideas of flexibility, we also have to realize that we need to start creating levels of uniformity across the environments. The ability to make sure that users have a consistent experience, whether they're accessing applications and desktops and environments on their tablets and mobile devices, whether they're changing these applications and these settings on mobile, and how do we persist this information as it goes over into their virtual desktop or into their streaming applications, because users are moving around constantly. And as we look at all of the different verticals we're working within, things like professional, commercial, healthcare, legal, you name it, we're seeing new types of workload requirements being brought to bear and new types of requirements that we need to fill in. This also means that we gain new flexibility. Another new feature inside of Horizon is the ability to have dynamic contextual policy. So a use case for this might even be something like healthcare, where you might have a user who's carrying around their device. And this could be, again, could be a Chromebook, could be a thin client, it could be a tablet device, it could be their own device or one provision from IT. We want them to be able to contextually have access to what makes sense. So if a user is operating on floor 1, for example, they're only going to see the printers and peripherals that are available on that floor. And then when the user moves to a different floor, they're only going to see printers, peripherals that are available to them on that floor. So this is a really important paradigm shift, because we're talking about not only users having access everywhere in a ubiquitous way, but now they're having access everywhere with ubiquity and context. So they're able to do everything they need to do from singular devices or even multitudes of devices, but they're able to do it in different forms of context with relational ideas around what they're accessing. Our own Stefan Asselin, one of our architects inside of the end user computing space, has built a really great demonstration around user environment management. We're going to take a look at that now.
Hello and welcome to the VMware User Environment Manager Technical Enablement video series. In this video, we will demonstrate one of the strongest features of the product, which is dynamic configuration of the user environment. As you can see here, we have a pretty vanilla Windows 7 desktop. No printers are mapped, the applications are installed are pretty limited. There is a drive map, but there is no predefined wallpaper. There's an image that exists that is accessible to that user, but nothing is actually set for that user environment. So we've locked the user, and we'll add a new trigger task that will be actually launched when the user unlocks his workstation. So we will refresh the environment of the user when the user unlocks his machine. In the action, we'll choose user environment refresh, and we'll click everything that we want to refresh. In this case, we'll refresh everything: the ADMX base setting, printer, file type association, shortcuts, and we'll actually display a message to the user saying, wait until your environment finishes to refresh. And we'll close after a few seconds. In this case, 5 seconds should be enough for the changes we have to do. So we'll go into the condition set. In this example, a lot of pre-populated information was done prior to this demonstration. But you can see that we're adding a lot of shortcuts for mappings and printers, and we're doing other configuration items. Let's add a condition set based on group membership. So we know Richard is a member of the sales EMEA group. So that triggered task will actually meet conditions based on Richard group 80 group membership. So we're going to go back into the user desktop, we'll enter the password for Richard, and we'll see that a lot of information is being refreshed. Shortcuts to proper applications, printer mappings are done, the proper printer mappings for that person based on his group membership, and also you can see that all the program shortcuts are now there and accessible for that user.
That was a fantastic demo. And beyond what we're able to do with user environment management, we have to remember that context and collaboration is key. How users are able to speak to each other inside of these spaces. VMware is making new strides, new advancements, and new package availability with Socialcast. Think of Socialcast this way. It's like social media for a corporate environment. Being able to have access to intranet resources, internal web applications, being able to have timeline type of, if you would, Facebook or Twitter style analytics inside of a business, so that not only are users able to interact with each other in a secure environment, that we're also able to provide the needs and requirements for IT and lines of business to understand, what we're looking at as far as, polling, as far as, user trend analysis and topic identification, so that all of business is able to interact with each other in a meaningful, collaborative sort of way. In addition, we're also bringing forward AirWatch video features, and these are just a few of the great features that are now available inside of this recent update. AirWatch Video allows corporations to have new, exciting ways to provide video content to their users. This could be for enablement, like we're doing today. This could be for video distribution of corporate events. This could, attach to the ideas of, mobile platforms for users to be able to keep up to speed on what's happening inside of their corporate environment, and to be able to provide meaningful metrics as to how this video content is being leveraged. So with all of the cool things that we're doing, we also have to talk about how else can we integrate inside of the data center. How are we going to store all these videos? How are we going to maintain security and scalability within all of these different spaces? And scalability becomes closer to us when we're looking at the integration of virtual volumes now with View. Being able to associate desktops based upon storage characteristics, based upon how we want to store them, and being able to offload virtual machine operations directly to the storage array. So whether or not we're using virtual SAN, we can still leverage those same vSAN type of technologies now with virtual volumes, and the virtual volumes integrated and capable storage area networks. And to also be able to map storage policies to desktops, so that specific desktops will be more performant than others, or be able to have storage policies applied to them because of the workloads that they're persisting with. So we're talking about scale. We're talking about all of these new additions. One of the things that we mentioned inside of the whiteboard was new concerns around security. What's happening? Virtual desktop infrastructure gave us a lot of green check marks. It allowed us to address things like data loss prevention, unauthorized access into workspaces. It allowed us to address, reduction in footprints and providing for, more efficient, centralized workload access and backups. But it didn't address everything. It didn't address for us user behaviors inside of their desktop. Things like zero-day threats and compromised internet websites, and ideas like desktop-to-desktop hacking. What happens when those desktops are back inside of the data center? How do we secure them? And even things like desktop-to-server hacking. So VDI has done a lot of great things for us. The desktop VMs also present a much larger attack surface, especially when we're talking about east-west intra-data center security. So how do we start to address these things that are of such great concern to IT? Well, traditional VDI network concerns really rise around some fundamental ideas. I mean, it's complex. We've got VLANs, access control lists. It's very labor intensive. things can happen. People can make small mistakes. As much as we try to avoid it, they're unavoidable. Also, provisioning is slow. Even though we can create desktops very quickly, creation of networks inside of this space for the desktops as needs and environments expand is still labor intensive and it takes time. And also, we're not protected against user behavior. We don't have a lot of visibility into threats inside of the desktop. This is where NSX comes in. By providing us the ability to have micro segmentation, so effectively security between workloads, and providing that firewalling and security right at the virtual machine layer. Now, it's important to remember that when we're talking about firewalls right at the virtual machine layer, it's not an operating system firewall. The virtual machine is not cognizant of the fact that the firewall exists. It exists at the NIC for the virtual machine. So there's nothing that the operating system or someone using the operating system can do to modify it. It also means that secondarily, now that we have that level of security, we can provide for workload or pool-based load balancing inside of our networks. This means that IT is going to come out looking like heroes when they're talking about these adoptions. Microsegmentation really simplifies the virtual desktop infrastructure network security strategy by being able to provide not only perimeter firewalls, but also inside firewalls, and again, being able to provide firewall resources between different workloads and even between different virtual machines. So as those virtual machines move around, or as those workloads become transitioned, maybe even based upon the naming convention of the virtual machine, we're able to provide security down to the most granular levels possible. So this is a lot to think about, and it also means that there's a lot to think about for business. So we have to ask ourselves a question: what makes a successful deployment? How do we get started with this? Well, if you've ever heard me present on this topic before, I typically have one common mantra, and that is the fact that it comes back down to assessment. You have to assess, and then assess again. VMware is making this easier through the integration of VMware assessment for Systrack, giving you as IT professionals access and insight into the enterprise, into platforms and mobility inside of the enterprise, and into machine activity and workload activity so that you can create meaningful metrics that you can take into your architectural designs and attach those into the way that you're going to be approaching the utilization of all of these cool new technologies. And leveraging the assessment is really straightforward. You go to assessment.vmware.com, register with a short form to access the dashboard, download the agent and run it, and allow it to gather the necessary data from the environment, and then the dashboard is going to keep you up to date as it grows and the process progresses. And then vet out the report, and you can access personalized reports inside of this space to review what's happening inside of the environment and determine the target environment's readiness and what the infrastructure requirements are going to be for a successful implementation. So today we had a chance to talk about a lot of new updates and new ideas around end user computing, and specifically around the way VMware's vision is aligning not only with today's concerns, but also the concerns and ideas for what's next, all by continuing to leverage existing investments while playing within the existing ecosystem and providing greater extensibility. We've seen ways that we're addressing flexibility at the user, operating system, and device level, providing greater choice through things like Google Chromebooks, providing greater user flexibility, even based upon conditions. using things like user environment management, being able to provide greater flexibility inside of the OS with Linux support for virtual desktops, being able to also address the needs of security in IT, both within the data center and between data centers with integrations for NSX, which also helps us address needs of concerns as these workloads move around within our data centers. And we're doing all this without sacrificing the needs of the user, still providing them greater forms of collaboration through integrations with things like Socialcast and Workspace, and allowing us as IT professionals greater levels of insight and clarity into how we advise inside of these spaces with VMware assessments. Thanks again for taking time today. I hope you found value in this session and encourage you to connect with your systems engineers out in the field, connect with your partners, connect with your distributors and resellers for more information. As always, feel free to check on this channel as well as follow me online at kgrow for more information on upcoming enablement sessions and more details of when we'll be presenting to you next. Thanks again, everyone. Have a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.